Very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of SOGM, I would like to welcome you all at this webinar on e-invoicing 2.0 challenges and way forward. After the successful implementation of phase 1 of e-invoicing, the CBIC notified that from 1st January 2021, e-invoicing will be extended for taxpayers having turnover of 100 crore and above. With the notification confirming that the government is going ahead with the next phase of implementation, the crucial question that arises is, are businesses ready to transition to the system? We believe that technology upgradation, coupled with a robust compliance tool, should now be the top priority of all eligible companies. Through this session that SOGM is organizing in association with tax technology partner BDO India LLP, for this session, we would like to apprise organization with key area of consideration requirements for modifying IT systems and adapting to the e-invoicing mechanism. Now, before we start the program, let me give a very brief introduction of our expert for this session. We have with us Mr. Rahul Agrawal, who is a partner of Entire Tax Video India. He is based out of New Delhi Gurugram office and is leading the entire gamut of activities in the entire tax field, including advising clients on business structuring, entry strategy in India, and contract drafting and reviews. Rahul has been the team leader on multi-state compliance assignments for clients in telecom, pharma, contracting, IT, and others. He has also assisted clients in obtaining various benefits under foreign trade policy as well as custom matters like anti-dumping duty litigations. Rahul has regularly represented clients before various department authorities and appellate tribunals of tax assessments, appeals, and other related litigation. He advised clients on GST impact assessment and implementation from both IDT as well as IT perspective. He has advised clients on GST advocacy with policymaker. He is a regular speaker at various forums of business chambers. I would like to request all the attendees to keep posting your queries in the question box during the session, which will be answered by Mr. Rahul after his presentation gets over. Now, without taking any more time, I would like to invite and request Mr. Rahul Agrawal in the interest of participation. Over to you, Mr. Rahul.
Thank you, Mr. Avinash. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to share my views with all of you. I'll just share my presentation and initiate the discussion. So to start the discussion, e-invoicing, as we all know, was mooted quite some time back, almost a year back, when we got the first notifications around this. And with all the deferments and everything that happened, finally we saw it being implemented for larger companies with turnover of more than 500 crores on 1st of October, which was kind of deferred to 1st of November. In terms of you were allowed to raise e-invoices even after a month's time. Once that was done, it moved on to the phase 2, which was for companies with turnover more than 100 crores. They were also brought under the net of e-invoicing, wherein all the documents that they generate would be required. So there are certain learnings and things that we have come to know or improved during a period of time. And there has been a certain learning curve that has been achieved due to the implementations done during the phase 1. So I'll first of all touch upon all things how GST automation journey has progressed thereafter e-invoicing, and finally on the fact that what e-invoicing entails and how does it impact the businesses. Lastly, we'll be discussing the challenges that has been faced and what is it that needs to be done. And if, like in phase 1, is there a requirement for a contingency plan to be there? So to start with, GST automation journey, was started in the first day itself. That is when the GST was introduced. The idea was to have a robust system where all this details are uploaded, be it inward or an outward. That is the inward supply or outward supply details, and accordingly the system would provide a lot of activities. That was somehow not, the first implementation was not that great, and it has somehow toned down a bit. And now the government has then started taking small steps towards coming back to the original system. So 2018, they started with the e-waybill implementation, where all the movement of goods e-waybill was necessarily required if the value exceeded a certain threshold. 2019, they started on the reconciliation part. They made during the year 1920, they made mandatory that the reconciliation has to be done. They put limits on the provisional credits so that people do those reconciliation. Coming 2020, they brought in e-invoicing for the large players and then moved on to the smaller players, medium-sized players, and would ultimately go to the smaller players to ensure that the outward data is in the system and consistent enough to allow that the system itself does a lot of purchase side reconciliations as well. All of this will culminate into auto population of returns. In terms of outward returns, we have already started to see that GSTR1 is now being auto populated basis the e-invoicing data wherever e-invoicing is applicable. The GSTR 3B is also being auto populated now basis the data of 2B that has been introduced, as well as GSTR 1. So the ultimate idea of the government is to ensure that the data that has ideally been introduced or in the or uploaded on the government portal at the time of e-invoicing or e-waybill, that is something that is used to generate returns, and the new data is not really altogether different from what has been already put in, so that there can be more consistency in terms of the data part. So on all of these aspects, some of the specific finer points that they have started doing is specifically with respect to e-invoicing, there are talks about bringing down the threshold further in the next 3 to 6 months to entities with turnover of more than 50 crores. That's something that has not yet been notified, or how it would be done, because there would not be such a robust IT infrastructure system that would be there. But they would anyway start sharing the e-invoices generated by the vendor or the supplier to the customers. So if a supplier raises an e-invoice, an intimation would go to their customer that such and such e-invoice has been raised on the portal, and these are the details. They are also phasing out the requirement of a separate e-waybill. They have kind of merged the data with e-invoicing for transactions requiring e-invoicing. There, for generation of e-waybill, you don't need to go across to e-waybill portal. We'll come to that in detail. Auto population of GSTR 1 and 3B, we have just mentioned that is there. Then they are also trying to bring in some part of communication between the recipient and the supplier, in terms of which was originally envisaged that a recipient can reject the purchase, which would then be communicated to the supplier for him to rectify or confirm. So all of that is something that is in the works and would ultimately be brought out. They've also started populating the data of IceGate in the 2B. That's there. On the e-invoicing front, while there were certain hiccups that happened for various people due to the new requirement that was there, however, still in the first month itself, there were approximately 5 crores of invoices generated through the e-invoicing portal. That's a substantial amount to start with in the first month. Coming back to e-invoicing, how has been the e-invoicing journey? While there a lot happened in the year 1920 as well, where the first time the schema was introduced. However, with the deferment and the current situation that is there, it was deferred to 1st of October. There was a understanding, or a lot of people thought that this might be deferred further, but the government was quite adamant on that in terms of, I would not say adamant, I would say that they were geared up to actually bring this reform. So was GSTN. So on 30th of July, they came up with a revised schema, which was to be used for implementation with effect from 1st of October. So, I mean, it gave only a couple of months to actually bring the systems in place to start on the e-invoicing. But either ways, e-invoicing became applicable 1st of October for 500 crore plus companies. It was allowed that any invoice raised in October the e-invoice can be generated from 1st November, thereby giving a leeway. But that was about it. It was still applicable from 1st of October. Now they have moved on to the fact that they are integrating the e-way bill generation with e-invoicing. So for example, a B2B invoice raised by a supplier on a customer, the e-way bill would also have to be generated from the same e-invoice portal. And there is no data that you can modify. The data that has been already uploaded, that would be used to generate the e-way bill. And this e-way bill cannot be generated from the e-way bill portal. So they are kind of saying that it's a integration of data that you are putting across so that the reconciliation is easier, both at your as well as the government's end. That's something that they have proposed, and it would start shortly. The auto population of data in the returns has already started. If you go ahead and look at the current month's return, which I'm sure a lot of people would have filed, it would be visible that this data is already reflecting, or you have an option to actually reflect, even download the data. So that's there. And this is obviously progressing towards auto population of GST return. The intention is to simplify it, that at least for companies with straightforward transactions, not much complexities, a lot of things can be done by the government themselves, and we just need to approve it. That's the perspective. Overall basis, what exactly is e-invoicing? While all of us would be knowing that what e-invoicing is, but just for the sake of repetition, I'll specifically mention that e-invoicing is the process of registering an invoice that you have already raised with the government. So the invoice that has already been raised through your billing system, your ERP, your accounting system, or manually, or either ways, those details of that invoice are required to be uploaded on the government portal, which would generate a unique 64-digit alphanumeric code, which is known as the invoice reference number. That, along with a QR code, which is a pictorial representation of certain set of data, once provide that to you and printed on the invoice, it becomes a e-invoice. Also to note is that if there is a car covered under the turnover of say more than 500 crore today and more than 100 crore starting 1st January, this is a mandatory requirement. In case you don't do it, then the invoice would be considered as invalid. So that is something that needs to be kept in mind. As I was mentioning, the intention of the government ultimately is to bring it down to or make the invoicing applicable to all the dealers. How it is to be done for the smaller dealers is still a challenge, but there is a very credible thought that this would come down to 50 crores within a period of 3 to 6 months. This is our discussion that are going on internally. Now, on what transaction is the e-invoice applicable? To clarify, e-invoice is applicable where ideally the both parties are registered. So it becomes a B2B invoice. That is one registered party raising an invoice on another registered party. This is applicable, and these becomes normally domestic transactions. That is the within India transactions. All of those gets covered. So all invoices raised, all credit notes raised, or debit notes raised, all these three documents gets covered. Apart from that, apart from the B2B documentation, if you are exporting, the other party would ideally not be registered because they're outside India. Still, the e-invoicing requirement at your end gets triggered. So any invoice that is raised for an export transaction, e-invoice is also covered on such transaction. There are certain questions that were raised on reverse charge transactions also. Please note that the basic requirement is that both parties should be registered in the case of a domestic transaction. So in case a lawyer raises an invoice on a company and for some reason the lawyer is registered and their turnover is more than the threshold limit, the lawyer would be required to raise an invoice, an e-invoice to clarify. He would not be required to pay tax on that because it is anyways payable on reverse charge by the recipient. but still the invoicing would have to be done through the e-invoicing channel, and a QR code in IRN needs to be there. It does not take away from the fact that the recipient would also be required to raise a self-invoice in the cases where the supplier is unregistered. But since one of the parties is unregistered in that case, the recipient self-invoice is not required to be done through an e-invoice. So just to clarify and summarize, if both the parties are registered, it doesn't make a difference whether the services are taxable under reverse charge or not. E-invoicing has to be done. Where it's a self-invoice for reverse charge, e-invoicing is not required, because then the assumption is that one of the parties, that is the supplier, is not registered. Business to government invoices are ideally not really put in a separate category, because government in normally all scenarios is registered. So it falls under the same scenario of B2B. But to clarify, yes, any invoices raised on the government, where the government department or government ministry or whosoever you are raising it on is registered, it happens. One of the last exceptions, or I would say specific transactions, are where e-commerce transactions are involved. In the case of e-commerce transaction, the e-commerce operator can raise an e-invoice on behalf of the supplier. So it's not the case where e-commerce operator raises an invoice. They will be generating an invoice on behalf of the supplier. So either the supplier can do it or the e-commerce operator, as per their understanding. Some legal provisions, as I discussed earlier, on 30th July 2020, the notification came specifically, which kind of continued the applicability of e-invoicing from 1st October on 500 crore plus companies, but deferred it for 100 crore companies. Thereafter, on 10th November 2020, it was clarified for 100 crore also it is applicable from 1st of January. There was some confusion around turnover also, but it was very clearly clarified that the turnover being talked about is GST aggregate turnover for any of the years under GST. So if somebody was crossing the threshold in 18-19, but is not crossing the threshold in 19-20, the assessee would still be covered. Where does the power come from, or how has it been implemented? There are two changes that they have done. One, they have added the requirement of printing the QR code on the invoice under Rule 46. The specific details that needs to be uploaded have been added to Rule 48. Under Rule 48, they have given a specific schema, as there is being called, or a form INV01, which essentially details the data points that are required to be uploaded for generation of an e-invoice. And it has also been then clarified that any other document where an e-invoice is required would not be considered valid. Also, they have clarified that earlier there was a requirement of an original, duplicate and triplicate copies. They are saying where e-invoice has been generated, you can do away with that requirement. That's not an SCT under the law. You may choose to mention that on the invoice, but for the government purposes, all the three would be same. As a link, there's a specific website by the government where you can generate the IRN. For people who are doing an automation, there's a specific website for the API developers where you can do the automation part of it. Just moving on, there are certain types of services or companies that have been made exempted from e-invoicing. These are primarily in the nature of financial and NBFCs, where the services that they are providing are the e-invoicing is not required. The only question is that whether only the services which fall under these category are not required, or it is for the entire thing. The FAQ, which says specifically talks about the case, certain cases where it's on the entity level, but that's still not mentioned in the law specifically. So we'll have to be clear upon what our position is on that. SEZ units are also not required to raise an e-invoice, so are insurance companies, GTA, and persons providing exhibition of cinematograph film in multiple screens. So Those are the entities or services which have been exempted from e-invoicing. Now we come to the procedure part of it, which is of most relevance. The earlier part becomes more like a knowledge session, but this is something that is actually required because these are the things that we need to follow and ensure on a day-to-day basis. The procedure, as I mentioned earlier, is the fact that the details of the invoice are to be uploaded on the government portal. The government portal is referred to as an invoice registration portal, where you upload the data and the invoice gets registered. This is being maintained by NIC. The same organization is also maintaining the Waybill data. So they have quite a bit of experience around handling such kind of data. As mentioned, the details that are to be uploaded, there's a specific format, which is also called as a schema. This has been released by NIC and being time to time updated through various validations or additional data fields that are required. There are two sets of data in that, mandatory and optional. We'll come to that in the next slide. But to say that the data has to be uploaded, once the data is uploaded, the IRP will verify that data and generate a 64-digit IRN number. Now, what is this 64-digit IRN number? What they do is that they take 4 data fields from the data that you have uploaded. These data fields are your GSTN, your invoice type, that is whether it's an invoice, credit note, or a debit note, your invoice number, and the period to which it pertains. Taking these 4, they use an algorithm to convert it into a unique 64-digit code. This code is unique for a specific set of data. In terms of if you change any of the 4 any of the 4 fields, any data, even a single digit is changed, the IRN that was generated would change. So it's unique for a set of data to help them control things. Lastly, after the IRN has been generated, they generate a QR code. A QR code is something that we kind of see in our daily life, be it a Paytm or a Google Pay or either ways. You see that those QR codes everywhere. It's nothing but a pictorial representation of a data. So once you scan it, the system or the application reads the data that is there in the picture and accordingly shows it on your screen. So the QR code which is being provided by the IRP, they 8 types of data is part of that pictorial that QR code. Your GSTN, your customer's GSTN, the invoice number, the invoice date, and the total invoice value. Thereafter, they also mention the number of line items in the invoice. So it's not a line item level data, but just a counting of the number of line items in the invoice and the HSN code of the highest value item. So if there are 10 items on that, whichever item has the highest value, that HSN would be reflected. If there are multiple line items with the same value, the first one will be picked up. And lastly, the IRN generated in the previous step, that would be added to it. The combination of this makes it a QR code. It is also verified, or you can say digitally signed by the authorities, so that once you scan this QR code using the government provided application, you will be able to see whether it's an authentic QR code or not. Because generating of a QR code is not a big deal. There are standard applications that are available. You put in any information, they'll generate a QR code for that information. Some of you might have or have seen visiting cards with a QR code which contains the details of the person giving the visiting card. So same way QR code can be generated by anyone, but this is an authenticated QR code and signed off by the government. So using the government application, the scan e-invoice application that they have provided, if you scan this QR code, it would tell you whether it's an authentic one or somebody has just put that across as a copy. So that's how these two things are generated, IRN QR code, and then sent across back to the original, back to the supplier. Once that is done, you are ready to print it on the invoice, and once printed, that becomes a valid e-invoice. Now, this is the process flow which has been ideally provided by the GSTN. depends upon what they are right now and what is it that they want to do in the long run. So as I mentioned, the seller provides the details in a specific format to the IRP, the registering portal. They check that the registering portal checks the data, generates the IRN, verifies that the same IRN has not been received earlier by them, or it might be available at the GSTN system. Once that deduplication check, as they are calling it, or a verification that has not been received earlier is confirmed, they sign it and send across, add the QR code and send it across back to the seller. Further, the data is also communicated to the GSTN system for the GSTN system to store and populate the return. And lastly, they are in the process of making a system where the said IRN QR code and the invoice details would also be communicated to the buyer through their registered email ID. So for example, if I sell it to a company and I mention the GSTN of the company, the GSTN per se would have that details of the authorized email ID against that GST number. So they would send across this mail on that mail ID stating that this invoice has been raised on you. The option to generate e-way bill at the same time along with the e-invoice is also there. You add across the details that are required to generate e-way bill, the transporter details, the vehicle details, and at the same time e-way bill would also be generated and sent across back to you. That's also an option which is already up and running. Parallelly, GSTR 2A of the buyer gets updated, 2A and 2B, for them to look at it in terms of that, okay, this purchase is appearing or not. That is also being done on a kind of a real-time basis. So going forward, the communication to the purchaser or the buyer would also start to happen on a real time. That's the intention. Coming back to the formats, as we were discussing on the formats, what are the details that are required to be uploaded? There have been certain changes to it, and there are certain additional details that have been added. In total, there are 132 columns of data that you can submit. So 132 columns of data is too large a data to send through, but they have included everything that possibly can be there on an invoice. Be it additional things like payment details, bank details, or any other export details, any reference details, all that stuff has been added. But the mandatory columns are 31 columns. If these 31 columns of data is filled in and provided, the e-invoice will be generated. Any of the data in this 31 column is missing, e-invoice would not be generated. Now the point to note out here is that this 31 column mandatory is only in the case of domestic transactions, domestic B2B transactions. In case it's an export or a specific type of transaction, there are additional number of columns that becomes mandatory. So if you see on your screen, there are 3 tables on the right hand side: mandatory, conditional mandatory, and optional. So mandatory are those columns which are there mandatory for B2B transactions. You will have to fill them up. The conditional mandatory gets triggered if the respective section or respective heading becomes applicable to you, or you choose to fill that data. For example, in the case of export, there is a column export details or heading export details, the 5th last part. You see there's no mandatory column in that because it's not mandatory that each transaction would be export. But if it is export, you need to fill in this column, and there is one field where you need to put that across mandatorily. Rest 6 are optional. So in that case, the mandatory fields would go up from 31 because of the change in the nature of transactions. So a minimum 31 are good enough to generate the e-invoice. You can add in the e-way bill details or payment details or otherwise, however you wish, but that's about it. There were certain changes that were done in the API when they were introduced in July and subsequently. I've listed some of them down. I'll just run through them People can read it also in parallel and ask questions if there's any questions. I'll just put in the important ones. To start with, the basic concept of GST was that whether it's IGST or CGST would be determined basis supplier state and place of supply. How it is, in this case, they were not really verifying it. Now they had started to verify it. The second was that they have removed the requirement of linking an invoice to a credit note or a credit note to an invoice and submitting that information. So when you generate a credit note, you have to tell which invoice does it pertain to, but those details are not required to be reported. So that is the exact requirement which they removed here. Then there were certain specific transactions which came to notice that wherein while the receiving state was the same, but the transaction qualified as IGST. So for example, in SEZ supply to an SEZ unit, it qualified as an IGST, but the state could have been the same. So it was creating a challenge. So they clarified and brought in a new field by which you can identify and highlight such transactions. Then at the invoice level, so earlier they were giving discount and other charges at the line item level. They also added it to an invoice level. That was there. PIN codes, which were earlier being validated, was creating a challenge. So they have, as of now, removed that temporarily, but it's likely to come back. Further, they have also introduced a validation that the recipient GSTN should be active. In case you raise an invoice and the recipient GSTN is inactive, it will not go through. It would give you an error. Now, this is causing some of the errors today, that my data is all correct, but e-invoice is not getting generated because the recipient GSTN might not be active. Okay, so that is something that we need to confirm. Further, the last point that is mentioned, which is very strategic importance, that for any movement when we need e-waybill for documents which have been run through e-invoicing and an IRN QR code has been generated, e-waybill will not be allowed to be generated from the e-waybill portal. So you will have to come back to e-invoice, put in the transporter details and generate an e-waybill from the IRP portal itself, using the details that have been earlier provided as part of generation of e-invoice. Now, a specific ambiguity that has arisen on account of printing format of the invoices. Rule 46 clearly says that there are certain details that you print on the invoices, plus a QR code that would be a valid e-invoice. So as far as Rule 46 is concerned, we are clear. Now, generation of e-invoice has been brought in through Rule 48, Sub-Rule 4, which says an invoice should be prepared by including the details provided in Form GST INV 01. Now, when it says prepared by including the details provided, then whatever is mandatory under INV 01, the 31 columns that we talked about, all of those should also be included. That's what the language says. Invoice prepared by including these details. That would ideally mean the mandatory columns, which are in addition to what is prescribed in 46, may also be required to be printed. While the intention might not be that this is more from a perspective of e-invoicing, but the literal meaning of the words that have been mentioned in Rule 48.4 is creating such an ambiguity. And we all know that where there's a scope of interpretation, there's always a chance of a litigation happening. So it's a call to the respective companies that whether they want the details of Rule 48.4 also to be added to their current invoice, or they are okay with the 46 plus QR code. There are about 5 to 6 columns which are logically more from a perspective of e-invoicing, that is the detail uploading and verification. But by what has been mentioned in the rule, it also creates an ambiguity. Just to further clarify, there has been a recent FAQ where it has been mentioned that you are required to print 46 along with QR code. It does not say 48 is yes or no. So that is not very clear. So that needs to be kept in mind, and a decision should be taken on that, well documented, to avoid any subsequent issues. Now, I think the QR code part, the QR code has to be affixed on the invoice. That's a mandatory thing, and it should be machine readable. If it is not machine readable, then it's essentially not not something that can be verified. So therefore, without that, a smaller in size QR code which is not machine readable would not work. I have already explained multiple copies, original, duplicate, triplicate that was required. That has been done away with. That's no more a requirement. Lastly, was a requirement of printing a dynamic self-generated QR code on B2C invoices. That requirement was made applicable 1st of November. Now it has idly been deferred that you can raise an invoice without that till 31st March, or no penalty would be applied if a dynamic QR code is not on the B2C transactions. I'll just clarify, in case of B2C transactions, you are not required to upload the data on e-invoice portal. If you send it multiple times, they will reject it and block your access for a fixed time. So this is a self-generated. Your ERP, your accounting system, your service provider should be in a position to provide you a dynamic QR code for all B2C invoices. Which would entail, which is a push towards digital payments. But that is something which is not required to be done through the government portal. That is to be self-generated. And ideally, that requirement is active. They're just saying that if an invoice is issued without that, there would be no penal consequences to it. But since it is active, we should look at it and start to generate a dynamic QR code with the details of the respective invoice and a payment link, and print it on the invoice. That's a requirement that is there. Lastly, from the process perspective, there are multiple ways that you can generate it. First is an API based method where you can directly connect across to the government portal using a GSP or getting a direct API from the government portal or a third party provider, where an automation activity happens. From your ERP, the data automatically goes across to the system, to the government portal, and comes back with the IRN QR code for printing through your system. The second option is an offline tool-based manual method, where you feed in the details to the utility, upload it, and download the data and print. The last is you do everything in your system. You just get a GSP. GSP are licensed service providers by the government who are allowed to provide you connectivity to the GSTN. They are secure environment security protocols that are enabled for them and constantly verified. So these are authorized service providers by the government, so you can use through the GSP method also. So ideally speaking, the first and the third method are automations. The second method is a manual mode of doing things. Well, I've talked about the relationship between IRN, e-invoicing and e-way bill earlier. I'll just clarify and summarize the things out here. For the documents requiring e-invoicing and e-way bill, where they meet the threshold, both of them have to be generated starting 1st of January. Both of them, wherever required to be generated for the same document, have to be generated through the IRP portal. In case there is an e-invoice that has been generated and subsequently you need to generate an e-way bill, you are allowed to put in the additional details of transporter and the vehicle and get the e-way bill generated. You cannot modify any of the details already submitted. Lastly, if you are required to cancel an invoice or an e-way bill, I'll take that in two parts. The first is where you have generated an e-way bill and you want to modify it. The modification is only allowed to the extent of transporter details or vehicle details. If you wish to cancel it, an independent e-way bill can be cancelled and generated again. Independent e-way bill. I'm not talking about e-invoice yet. where an e-invoice has been generated and subsequently an e-waybill has also been generated, and now both needs to be cancelled, then e-waybill needs to be cancelled first, and thereafter an e-invoice can be cancelled. The portal would not allow a cancellation of e-invoice if e-waybill is active on that. Okay. We'll come to IRN cancellation in a minute, but from an e-waybill perspective, generation, again, I'm just repeating myself that IRN, e-invoice and e-waybill both have to be generated from the same portal for the transactions where e-invoice is applicable. All other activities, that is generation of e-waybill for B2C transactions or delivery challan scenarios, has to be done through e-waybill portal. Any modification or cancellation of e-waybill for all types of e-waybill generated, be it B2B or B2C, has to be done from e-waybill portal only. So the only change is generation of e-waybill for B2B and export documentation, that has to be now done from IRP. Cancellation of e-invoice, this is a very critical part of it, because as we will be discussing subsequently, the major impact of e-invoicing is that we were earlier required to report the details only once we filed the return, that is at the end of the month. That allowed us certain amount of flexibility for amendment, modification, cancellation. Now that ideally has been taken away from us because we are required to upload the data on a real time. Further, there is no modification amendment that is allowed for an e-invoice. So if you generate an invoice, upload the details to the government portal and have already generated an e-invoice, you will not be allowed to cancel. You will not be allowed to modify it. You can cancel it till 24 hours from generation. Post that, it cannot be cancelled. You will have to raise a credit note to reverse it. So up to 24 hours, you can cancel it, no modification allowed. Post 24 hours, you can amend it. Reverse it using a credit note. There is no modification that is required, that is allowed. The details get populated to GSTR1 also, and there is a thought process that subsequently you will not be allowed to remove the data in GSTR1 also, but that is still being discussed. Further, if the e-waybill has been validated at a checkpost, the government authorities have verified it and validated it at any checkpost, thereafter neither e-waybill nor e-invoice can be cancelled. Moving on, amendment, I've already mentioned there's no amendment that can be done once an e-invoice is done. So no data changes allowed. Even if it's a non-mandatory and optional data, then also if you have uploaded, you cannot modify it. No modification, zero modification. And once you cancel it, the same invoice number cannot be used again. So invoice number 01 generated, cancelled. The next invoice would be 02. 01 cannot be used again. That's very clear. Now, what is the actual impact on business? Now, invoicing is the basic activity which is most critical in terms of booking, generating revenue, doing supplies, sales, and everything. So we have to ensure that the data part of it is there and the invoicing can be done on a real time. There is no delay in sales due to non-generation or delayed generation of invoice. So therefore, there are certain specific requirements that arise out of it. The first becomes, we have our customer and vendor databases available. Those needs to be clearly mentioned, provided, so that you can very well have those, in terms of clear from all validations. If that is available, then half the battle is won, because in our experience, the majority issues that are arising only on account of data not correctly available. Once the data is corrected in terms of GSTN numbers are correct, the PIN codes are correct, the mobile numbers are correct as required, all that data is done and cleared, thereafter half the errors go out. So therefore, we would need to reevaluate our customer and vendor databases. Secondly, we would need to have a good IT system to ensure wherever our invoice count is more, say more than a 50 or 100 a month, ideally we should have an automated system through which it is done to avoid any discretion on the part of the user. Because the user, once they have a discretion, would do whatever takes shortest time. Whether it is right or not, that's a separate thing. So that's why an IT system which minimizes human involvement, at the same time training the users to ensure that if there is an error or a challenge that arises, they can very well and quickly change it. Further, today a lot of ERP systems generate invoices. So invoices are still a bit better as opposed to e-waybill. E-waybill are normally done manually, going to the portal, putting across the details and generating an e-waybill. And there are various flexibilities that people have taken over a period of time. Those need to be weeded out, and a clear business process needs to be established so that there are no challenges. I'll give you an example. In case of export, the ship to details, if you mention on the invoice, would ideally be of your customer who would be outside India. But the waybill has to be generated till the port. So the data that would go for e-invoicing might show the ship to details as something else, while the waybill generation would happen with a different ship to details. So these kind of things needs to be managed on a real-time basis. Further, with the real-time uploading of data, we also at our end needs to be aware that whenever an invoice is raised, it is correctly available and all the backups and everything are there. Because now the data is reaching the authorities on a real-time basis. We cannot have the plea that, okay, at the month end we are going across and we are going to report it. It has to be reported on a real time, so all those things change. So it's a major change where a business process is concerned, both from an e-invoicing and e-waybill perspective. And the user training, making the user aware of the challenges, what are the requirements, and what is the impact if they do not do it correctly, has to be seen. In certain cases, it happened in e-waybill that there were a value of a invoice was 10,000 and it was, or 1 lakh, and while entering a waybill, 10 extra was added, 10 lakh was done, and now it was not subsequently cancelled. The authorities had a reconciliation issue and came back. Such kind of challenges now with e-invoicing and e-waybill should be avoided to an extent possible, and they can be avoided only through ensuring that there are proper processes, IT infrastructure, and users trained so that the data coming in to the system are correctly available. One important point that is there, we are all looking at e-invoicing as a change in the outward way. I mean, in terms of how we deal with our outward, the invoicing and other things. There's a major change that happens on the purchase side as well. Whether your vendors are required to generate an e-invoice or not, there is a government portal where you can put in the GSTN and verify that. But how do you do it on a real-time basis when you are booking purchase invoices and when there are thousands in number? So there also the IT system and the processes come into place to ensure that the credit availed is correct, the documentation available is correct. Wherever a QR code is required, it is there and it is authentic. Because without that, it's not a valid invoice. And without a valid invoice, we all know how the authorities treat our credit in case we do not have a valid invoice. So that also needs to be specifically looked at. So as time to time, I have been mentioning on what are the experiences that we have faced during the implementation of e-invoice. The main thing, as I mentioned, was the data part of it. How good is the data? If the data is good and validations are there, it saves a considerable amount of time while implementation and subsequently as well. The testing part becomes very, very relevant to weed out any such challenges and clear it before we go live. And therefore, data handling is data consistency and confirming that the data is correct and valid is the main requirement that is there. Also, there are certain specific challenges that are there. For example, TCS has been recently introduced under income tax. Now, there was a big question around how to take care of TCS. So it has been clarified that it can be at a line item level in other charges, which is non-taxable. Now it raised another question. Some of the industries do charge some freight or insurance or any other charge over and above the item rate. Now that sometimes it's in line level basis, sometimes it's at an invoice level basis. They have clarified that you have to club all of that and enter it like a separate line item. So it cannot be a part where you put it as other charges, because other charges is definitely not taxable, considered non-taxable in the government portal. So all of these things needs to be properly documented or processes made even for transactions which are not frequently being done, because today we implement and get it over with. Subsequently, one-off transaction comes into the place and we have not done the testing of that and it gets stuck. That creates challenge. So it's better to have a detailed testing done to ensure that all types of transactions are there and covered, so that there are no subsequent issues that are there. Moving on, what are the challenges that we have faced so far? Obviously, there are various types of ERP, various challenges in various ERPs, customizations that we have done over a period of time, which have resulted in multiple changes there. So all of that, streamlining it and bringing it to a level where we automate it is itself a challenge, and has sometimes taken up to a time of a couple of months. A good implementation is normally done within a 2-3 week scenario, but sometimes it goes up to 2 months as well due to these challenges. So that therefore the ERP needs to be up to date. All of the things needs to be discussed beforehand and ensure that the technically competent people are there to actually help you with the implementation part. The cancellation is the second aspect, because a lot of people are in the habit of generating an invoice and subsequently cancelling it because before the return is filed. That option ideally has been reduced to 24 hours, and that too on the government portal. So that needs a specific process defined, specific parameters, whether you disallow all the cancellations and route all of them through credit notes itself, or how it is to be managed needs to be there specifically. What we have learned so far is that in the NIC portal, that is the IRP portal, the e-invoice data only resides for 3 more days. Thereafter, it is moved on to GSTN for GSTR1 population, but otherwise that data is not there. It is something similar to what happened in Waybill initially. So that data should be maintained at our end, because IRN and QR code is something that you would always need now and subsequently in assessment as well. Further, the we are now in a situation where we have to further add to the reconciliations. Earlier, GSTR1 was something that we declared, so GSTR1 and 3 were the only 2 things. Now we have an e-invoicing coming in, an e-waybill coming in, and a GST return coming in also. And the most difficult part is that e-invoicing is only for a part of data, e-waybill is for a different set of data, and return is a combination of all of that data. So reconciling these things is certainly a challenge. As quickly as we have as defined and as quickly as we have processes in place, they would certainly help. B2C transactions, as I mentioned, self-generated QR code, not a lot of clarity available, still a challenge. Lastly, the documents which are outside the e-invoicing net, the bill of supplies, the delivery challans, the B2C transactions, job work and others, they also needs to be properly streamlined so that while reporting the data in the return, nothing is left out. While generating an e-waybill, nothing is left out. So all of that, because multiple types of data is available at multiple locations, the reconciling and ensuring everything has been reported properly and available, and submitted after 2-3 years in assessment requires having a good IT infrastructure right now so that the same data can be made available subsequently also. One thing that I would want to highlight is that what happens if a e-invoice is not generated. Obviously, it's a contravention of the law if the law says that you have to generate an invoice in a manner and you do not generate it in that. So it would be an invalid invoice. So it can be, if and this is not done, then an invoice generated will not be considered a valid document. If you issue it, you will be deemed to have issued an incorrect or an incomplete, invalid invoice. If there's a movement that happens, that would still be the same. So all of that is from a supplier's end. Customer also, if they get this kind of a invoice which is without IRN and QR code, they will not be able to take credit, because one of the 4 requirements is that you should have an eligible document under the law. And in vendor who is required to issue an e-invoice, if he does not issue it, then whatever document he issues is not a valid invoice. Further, transportation would be a challenge because the goods can be confiscated in absence of the complete and correct documentation. So, in a nutshell, it is not just a small infraction of the law. It can have severe consequences on everything. Now, what is it that is required to be done? Obviously, the first thing becomes whether it is applicable to you or not. The aggregate turnover defined is in nature of the fact that any intercompany invoicing, inter-branch invoicing, stock transfer, everything is included. So whatever is the turnover as per GST is included therein in any of the previous years. So once you have done that, the second aspect is to analyze where we are and where we want to go. So in terms of, there is a specific set of data required by the government, specific set of information required with specific validations. We need to verify that vis-a-vis the data that we have today available to be aware what additionally needs to be captured or what additional data needs to be generated. Once that is done, we have a roadmap of what is it that we need to do. The next step would be to determine what is the method that you need to follow or you wish to follow for generation of an e-invoice. As I mentioned, whether it's an automation process through API, that is a real-time activity, or through a batch processing, or a manual activity, basis your requirement, business requirements, or commercial requirements. Once that is done, obviously now this is the execution part, where you actually have to implement the API system or the manual generation system so that the print can be received, and thereafter putting in the process so that whatever has been implemented is kind of followed. Further, lastly, you need to also verify those things in terms of the process that has been set, whether it is being followed or not. This is a time-consuming task, and surely now that 1st January is looming, it would be difficult for people if they have not started yet or are in initial stages to be up and running by 1st of January. So we would also need to specifically have a contingency plan. Now, what becomes a contingency plan? The idea is that if the automation does not work or the automation does not get active by that time, we need to ensure that there is a parallel details that are available in terms of the manual option. So there are options available in the market where you can modify or get your invoice structured in a third-party tool which can help you generate the e-invoice, so that the invoicing does not stop till the time we are up and running on the automation, or in the case an automation suddenly breaks down. You should have a fallback contingency plan for 1st January or otherwise, where you can manually upload the details and get your invoice in the format that you require. So those kind of contingency plans should also be there. One point that I wanted to mention beforehand is the steps that needs to be done. We have discussed, but just further reiterating, we have to check our ERP. What is the level of ERP that we have? What are the support systems that ERP allows us to do? Then having a comparison of where we are in terms of documentation, in terms of data. What are the additional fields that I or the business has been generating earlier and would want to continue to generate them? How is it that going forward the things would be there? And how is it that the error handling or troubleshooting would be done? Because in certain cases, the invoicing is done once the material has been loaded and the truck is ready to move. At that point of time, delaying things leads to a lot of challenges. So therefore, all kinds of troubleshooting plan and contingency plan should also be there in picture to ensure that things are done on time and in a smooth manner. That's broadly from my end. We can move on to the question answer part.
Yeah, so the questions are there in the chat box and Q&A side, if you can see.
Right.
Lots of people have asked the questions.
Right. So I'm first taking the chat section. The first question is it mandated to print QR on invoice, and it should be readable through application? So I have already mentioned this specifically that the QR code needs to be in a readable format and the application should be able to read it. If it is not, then ideally it does not satisfy the requirement of the government that the QR code is something which can be scanned to confirm the details have been properly uploaded and the QR code is authentic. So therefore it has to happen. Whether it's so the follow-up question on that is what happens if the QR code is not readable due to printing issues or the quality of QR reader, etc. So see, ideally it's more a practical challenge that is there. If there's a printing issue that is there, you need to rectify it. If the QR code reader is not good, then you need to change it. If there are any challenges during the conveyance, a soft copy of the invoice carried on the phone is also good. So that can also be done. But that's a requirement and has to be adhered to. This next question is that if the supplier is unable to get the QR code printed on its stationery, can he supplement his invoice stationery with the iron print as taken from the portal along with QR code? See, this is something that is not really completely advisable because an additional document with a QR code, whether it is part of the invoice or not, is not something which authorities take a lenient view to. They may take it in the starting. So the idea is that either you should have something which should relate those two documents. Having the entire invoice on one document and only the QR code on the second document would create a challenge. Again, there are options available where you can print the QR code as a sticker and paste it on the invoice itself. Those kind of options can be explored. But this is not a suggestible option that only the QR code is part of the another document. What you can possibly do is take the entire invoice printout from the government portal, treat it as the primary invoice, and affix your invoice behind it. That could be an option. There's a question that how far the customer data is safe in these portals which we use for e-invoicing. There are certain sets of security protocols that everybody has to pass through. I mean, if you have a technical team which is there, they would be able to tell you which of the portals are safe and secure. The government portal, obviously, the government is guaranteeing their safety from a data perspective. But yes, third-party providers, you have to ensure that when you sign an agreement, it is clear that your data cannot be used for telemarketing and stuff. Small-time players or people who are offering things on a as a stopgap arrangement, there may be challenges to that. That is something for each and every person to look at and ensure that the data is not shared. Lastly, next question, can MSCs with turnover much below 100 crore opt for e-invoice. At this point of time, they are not allowed. It's not a voluntary thing that is there. On the purchase side, you can download the app and verify, but on the sales side, while generating e-invoice, you are as of now not allowed. Once they stabilize the system, they may make it voluntary, but right now it is not. The next question is, as per Rule 46Q of CGST rules read within IT Act, the supplier is required to sign the tax invoice, but e-invoice is not signed by the taxpayer. I think it's a bit reverse, where it says that, okay, so there are two things to it. One is that if it's a computer generated invoice and not digitally signed, but signed by the IRP, that is considered a valid invoice. You don't need to countersign it. If you generate an e-invoice and do not digitally sign it, it's okay. You don't need to countersign it. Okay, next question is, okay, PPT would anyways be shared. E-Waybill is not mandatory. So the question is E-Waybill mandatory for professional services? E-Waybill is applicable on specific cases that are prescribed, which is only for movement of goods. If during the course of provision of service, you are also providing certain goods, then it may be required. But it's not mandatory if it's only a service with no movement of goods involved. And that too, there is a limit. In certain states, it's 50,000, or in certain states, it's even 1 lakh. That's there. A specific question related to reverse charge. A lawyer registered under GST raises invoice on a company. Turnover of lawyers below 500 crores, but turnover of companies above 500 crores. Whether it's though it's B2B, since turnover of suppliers is less than 500 crores, e-invoice is not required. Is it correct? Yes, that is correct. A company will be raised. Okay. The follow-up question is, company will be raising self-invoice under section 9(3). However, it need not generate IRN. Is it correct? So in the case where both parties are registered, for example, the lawyer raises an invoice, that is a valid invoice. In such scenario, you will not be required to generate, the recipient is not required to generate an IRN. Okay, the next question is, due to some system issues, wrong data gets uploaded for IRN, but system has correct data and the same cannot be rectified. If by any reason any incorrect data is uploaded on IRP portal, the government portal, you need to cancel it or issue a credit note to reverse it. There is no option of amendment at the government portal location. So you will have to then cancel it at your end also and raise a fresh invoice. Okay, next question is, how can a customer ensure that invoice without QR code is from a company with turnover less than 100 crores? There are two practical ways that you can do it. One is the government portal has a link where you can put across anybody's GSTN and verify whether the party is required to generate e-invoice or not. So that is something that you can do. The second option is that you do the check at the time you do a vendor registration in your system and accordingly verify it from there and tag it in the system. Doing it manually is possible. Getting a confirmation from vendor is possible, but that does not stand in the eyes of the law. The vendor may be at fault, but you would also suffer because of non-availability of credits. Okay, the next question is, credit note cannot be issued in system as system had correct data. It doesn't make a difference if the data is correct or not. Whatever the data is already there in the system, using that you will have to raise a credit note. We are in the process of automation, but we expect there may be a delay. In that case, as a contingent plan, whether can we be able to generate manually extracting from the portal? Yes, you can do that. The format would be there. You will not have a say in changing the format, but that can be there. These are new questions that are coming in, so I'll just take the earlier questions that have already been raised in the Q&A section. The first question is, how does e-invoicing reduces tax evasion? Well, that's more a subjective question. I would just leave it to the fact that once all the transactions gets covered under e-invoicing, there would be a real-time reporting of invoices. So that would help the government in a better availability of data and may have a impact on tax evasion. There's a question, what is a direct API module? The government is also providing an option where you can approach the GSTN and get a direct connectivity to the government portal. So you don't need any GSP or an ASP or anybody else in between. You can directly connect your ERP to the government portal. In practical scenarios, that is not being given very frequently because there are a lot of security things that they need to verify. But yes, that can be given. The question is next is B2C payment QR code is essential. Yes, the requirement has been made applicable, but it is not being enforced in terms of there are no penal consequences of not following it. That's what they have mentioned. If you have to legally ask me, that is applicable today, but non-compliance does not involve a penalty till 31st March. So people are treating it as a deferment. I've already answered the question whether turnover below 100 can opt. No, it's not allowed. IRN needs to be printed on invoice. The authorities have clarified that if the QR code is there on the invoice, it contains the IRN. So specifically separately printing an IRN is not mandatory. That's what they have clarified. People on a conservative basis are still going ahead and printing both IRN and QR code. Next question is, what is the time limit of generating e-invoice for service contracts? The time limit of generating e-invoice is same as earlier that you were doing it for a normal invoice. There is no variation in that. E-invoice is not applicable to B2C transaction. Direct API I've already answered. It is mandatory along with goods after 24 hours can we create e-invoice and send to customer if there is a supply that is there. So the question is that is it mandatory that e-invoice has to be generated at the time of movement of goods, or it can be subsequently sent it through email? As per GST law, an invoice has to be generated on or at the time of supply where there is a movement of goods involved. So if you generate an e-invoice subsequent to the movement, you are contravening the act. So therefore, you have to generate an e-invoice before or at the time of supply. Whether you share it to the customer or not, ideally it should be done. Practically, you can if it's between you and the customer. I've already answered this question. How do we identify a supplier? You may obtain a declaration. You can go across and check it on the government portal. Declaration is an internal document, nothing to do with anything under the law. There's a question, difference between 2A and 2B, which should be availed. Well, it's not part of the discussion out here, but essentially the data in 2A and 2B is more or less similar. 2B is 2A with certain sets of filter. But that question I think we'll take in separately, not as part of this forum, because it's only invoicing that we're talking about. The next question is, any exemptions for SEZ units in generating e-invoice? Yes, SEZ units are exempted from generating e-invoices. Coming back to the chat section, yeah, there is a question is that there must be some system of IRN amendment. No, there is no process of IRN amendment. Any data provided to the IRP portal, no amendment can be done. There is a question on dynamic QR code, whether it should contain payment details to enable payment through various digital modes. We are already getting payments through NEFT and RTGS modes. See, the dynamic QR code says that you have to provide a payment option to the to your customer. If they are making a payment through online or through a wallet, then the payment details mentioned on the invoice would suffice. But otherwise, irrespective of the fact that you're getting payments in your bank, B2C requirement still is there. So you will have to print that. There are online details available on what ideally a dynamic QR code should have. In my opinion, the dynamic QR code for B2C transaction should have all the details that are there in the B2B QR code except IRN, and with an addition of payment details that should be there. Also, obviously, the customer GSTN would not be there. Then there's a question, does e-invoice needs to be generated for services also? Yes. All supplies under GST, whether it's goods or services, e-invoice needs to be generated. It's the e-way bill that is not required for services and only for goods. E-invoicing is required for all supplies under GST, whether it's goods, services, or both. There is one last question. Will TCS be reflected on e-invoice? If you choose to provide that data while uploading in the other charges column, they will bring it back and provide it to you. It's not a mandatory column, so it is an option whether you want to show TCS or not on the invoice under GST. So GST does not mandate the TCS to be shown on the invoice. I think all the questions are answered. There does not seem to be any other question. In case there is, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, that's all from my end. Back to you, Avinash. There's one, sorry, Avinash, one, I think some question that has just come in. Yeah, so it says that as per one of the FAQs, only QR code is mandatory and not IRN acknowledgement number. If supplier raises only with QR code or even with IRN, is it necessary for recipient to scan the QR code to verify, as it is time consuming to scan? It's not mandatory. It's a verification or a validation that you're doing. So it's your call if you wish to do that or not. Otherwise, it's not mandated in the law. But it needs to be authentic. That's clear. Authorities would be trying to validate it. If it is not validated, the credit would not be available. So yes, it's an option, but a suggested option.
There's another question which just comes is like how civil contractor will raise the invoice. How civil contractor will raise the invoice.
Okay. See, normally what happens in case of civil contracts is that there is a milestone based billing that happens. So whenever you achieve a milestone, you raise an invoice. I'm talking about it's a composite works contract where there is no separate invoicing for goods or services, one common milestone based invoicing. So the invoice, when it is raised on achieving of milestone, that would be a works contract invoice, and e-invoicing would have to be done. During the period, whatever supplies that you make for goods or services, there would be no document that would be generated for services. For goods, ideally the supply happens on a delivery challan. So an e-way bill would be generated. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah, so this is another question. Like they have asked, for example, SAP invoice generated on 1st January 2021 at 3 p.m. E-invoice generated on the same day at 3:30 p.m. And due to any reason, the stock movement is on 3rd of January. On 3rd of January, can we generate e-way bill?
Yes. So they have not asked you to generate e-way bill at the same time as e-invoice. This is very much allowed that you raise an e-invoice today and generate e-way bill subsequently when the actual movement happens. There is no time limit to that. Nothing that creates an issue. You can definitely do what you mentioned right now.
Well, I don't see any more questions, sir. So let me convey my sincere thanks to Mr. Rahul Agarwal for sharing his valuable views with all of us. And I must say that this PPT was very informative, and you have already cleared almost all the doubts that were raised by the participants. If you have any query, you can directly write to Mr. Rahul Agarwal. His email ID is given, and we will also share this PPT in which his contact detail will be given at your email ID. So I would like to convey my sincere thanks to BDO for participating in this program as a technology partner. And I would like to thank each one of the participants for attending this session. Now will conclude here, and we hope to have feedback from you on our email ID. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avinash. Thank you, all participants. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.